The question is that the motion be agreed to. Dr David Clark.
Mr Speaker, look, this bill is one that the Labor Party will support. We are always keen to see the loopholes in the tax system plugged. We are supportive of this tinkering. It's not a bad kind of tinkering generally, but we would prefer that actually the government was taking the big choices, making the big changes that are necessary to get our economy back on track. Look, the government has a problem. It has a hole to fill. It knows that the tax take has dropped 4%. Its own department, the IRD, tells it that 1.5% of that can be attributed to the global financial crisis, and that 2.5% of that can be attributed to policy changes. The government described its 2010 tax package as broadly fiscally neutral, but it has proven not to be the case. This government is looking to fill that revenue hole, and some of the changes we see in this bill are an attempt to do just that. But it won't change the fundamental outlook for our economy. It's a missed opportunity, another missed opportunity by a national government that has no plan. We need pro-growth tax policy in this country. We need research and development tax credits. We need a capital gains tax that neutralises the investment signal and encourages money to go toward the productive sector. This is a government that has abandoned our exporters. Aside from refusing to implement pro-growth tax policy, they're also refusing to give the Reserve Bank the mandate to act in the interest of jobs and employers. They are more interested in interest rates and the profits at the big end of town. This government has also failed in the area of KiwiSaver, although this is one area in the bill where the government is to be commended. Having previously dropped the rates of contribution from 4% to 2%, in this bill it now puts them up from 2% to 3%. It's a U-turn, it's a small one, but it's one in the right direction. But again, it must be said that it is tinkering. So when this government does want to make those big changes, how is it going to do that? Well, this is a hypothetical, and if it was a minister in the House at question time, he or she would probably refuse to answer this question on the basis that it's hypothetical. We don't see any plan for the changes that are needed to get our economy back on track. All we see is New Zealanders leaving at a rate of 1,000 a week for Australia. However, we know that even if they wanted to make the big changes and wanted to put them through in a bill like this, that they could not. The Prime Minister said in February this year, on Valentine's Day, he made a promise to New Zealanders on Valentine's Day, he said, and I quote here, that tax policy was being held because the government computer systems, quote, can't actually support radical changes from government. And that is why we're being asked here to make these tinkering changes. Now, the Prime Minister said that at that stage he didn't want to make any radical changes and so on, but he's admitted that if the government wanted to make the big changes that the economy needs, it couldn't make them. And then I'll quote the Prime Minister further. He said, "You don't want to be in a position where Parliament is held hostage to a lack of technology." That's what Mr Key said. That was 8 months ago. We still have not heard how he is going to fix the tax system, which is failing us as a country. Voluntary compliance is dropping in New Zealand. That's part of the reason the tax take is down. These little gap pluggers and minor changes that the government is putting through are in the right direction broadly. We'll be supporting them, but they are not going to get our economy back on track. We need a plan from the government as to how it is going to address the inadequacies of a tax computer system that was designed 20 years ago, before Facebook, before Google, and in fact before the internet as most of us know it. This is a computer system that is out of date. It's held together by sellotape, people who've worked at IRD say. A huge amount of their resource goes into maintaining a computer system that cannot cope with the kind of changes we need in our economy to get it back on track. And the government is not addressing this issue. We're seeing more and more privacy breaches, which is one of the symptoms of a department under pressure in the IRD. This is a pattern across government. Of course, we've seen it in ACC and in WINS, It's a systematic problem that the government is not addressing. But it means that we're getting this kind of legislation that we've got here in front of us, that makes small changes, that are in the right direction, but that are not going to fundamentally give us the kind of economy that we need. Now, I want to talk about KiwiSaver, which is directly in the bill in Part 3. It talks about how that rate is going to go from 2 to 3%. But let's remember that in 2008, National cut the minimum contribution rates for employees and employers to 2%, as I've just said, and then they also discontinued the employer tax credit. They also capped the employer superannuation contribution. They discontinued the fee subsidy of $40, and at the same time they repealed the Employment Relations Act. The National Government are not really in favour of this. They're reluctantly waking up to the fact that we have a savings issue. They are beginning to address it, but they're not addressing it in a way that's going to see substantive change. And we wouldn't even be having to do this if they hadn't cut the rate in the first place. That's the most important thing to note. This is extra work for the Parliament that wouldn't have had to happen if they hadn't cut that contribution rate for employees and employers in the first place. So this is a bill which illustrates more about what the government isn't doing than about what it is doing. The Labor Party has a plan. The Labor Party has a clear plan and has enunciated it. We need pro-growth tax reform. We need reform of our monetary policy so that the Reserve Bank has the powers that it needs to support our exporters. We need savings. We need procurement policies. The Labor in government has policies that would be transformative of the New Zealand economy and ensure that the industries in our country are well supported. But here, all we see is more red tape for business, and it's consistent with other areas. And here we see a few tinkering solutions to small tax issues. We also see in here a write-off for software development. This is one of the positive things, because I do want to compliment the government on the small positive steps that are in this legislation, because it is good to encourage the little steps forward that are in the right direction. We see there software development write-offs. This is a sensible move. This is a sensible move. It will make sure that the risk is taken out of software development so that we get more innovation in our country and we have more successful industry in that regard. I'm not sure whether it will be something that Kim.com can access. That might be a question for the Minister to answer at the end of this, whether he can access the software development write-offs and whether that's a possibility. But we know that what's really needed, Mr. Speaker, is a change in the way our tax system is structured. So we could have called this bill a lot of things. We could have called it the Tinkering While Wages Plummet Bill. We could have called it the National Flip-Flops on KiwiSaver Bill. We could have called it the Can't Make Big Changes Because Computer Systems Aren't Up to It Bill. We could have made it the 53% of children of sole parents are in poverty bill because the economy is not growing and tax settings are not right. We could call it the Confirming the 2010 Tax Switch Rates, which saw 44% of the value of the tax cuts go to the top 10% of earners, while just 2% of the value of the tax cuts went to the bottom 20%. We could call it the Confirming the GST Rise, which bit into low earners bill. We've seen the median wage drop further. We know that those tax changes that were made in 2010 that have made our economy so much less fair, that have seen those who are already wealthy prosper further and those that are struggling struggle more. That's what this bill is asking us to confirm. We know that that is something that we on this side will have to swallow as a bitter pill, because the other measures in the bill are reasonable if somewhat moderate and could do better. When 90 of the 100 wealthiest New Zealanders are not on the top tax rate, we know something's wrong. We need pro-growth tax reform, and we need a capital gains tax that makes sure that all New Zealanders are paying their fair share. That is what New Zealand needs. New Zealand needs big changes to help our economy grow. We need savings policies, we need monetary policy reform, we need procurement policies and pro-growth tax reform, Mr. Speaker.
I call Todd McLean.
Mr. Speaker, that was an appalling speech from that last member, full of doom and gloom, and that was it. Anybody would think we were back